I apologise that women had to witness this today, but in our land, our women have to see the same. You people will never be safe. Remove your governments, they don't care about you. Tell them to bring our troops back so you can all live in peace. Leave our lands and you will live in peace, that's all I have to say.
The man you just saw giving a shocking statement to smartphone cameras on the streets of London was 28-year-old Michael Adebolajo, who had just carried out one of the most heinous crimes in recent British history. A crime that is still remembered and a victim that is still honoured until this day. Fusilier Lee Rigby had served for his country during British Army tours of Cyprus, Germany, and even Afghanistan, but after spending time in some of the most dangerous places and war-torn countries in the world, it would tragically, ironically, be on the streets of his own country where his life would meet an abrupt end. But after that heartbreakingly abrupt end to Lee Rigby's life, we found out that this was no accident. In fact, this was what some might call a statement killing by two men who showed absolutely no remorse in the aftermath of the event. This is the story of Lee Rigby.
So this episode contains detail of a horrendous attack of an innocent man in broad daylight. And we're going to discuss the events and actually what happened on this day. Not only that, we're also going to discuss some themes of radicalisation and also some things around terrorist activity. We're going to provide the facts and the sort of instances of what actually happened in this case. And what we never do is pass, judgment on people or sort of, tie anyone with one brush.
Yeah.
Right? It's a really tough subject to cover, but we felt that it was important to actually discuss this story and actually talk about it.
Like every episode we do on here, we don't mean to cause any offence, and our thoughts, most importantly, are with those involved.
If you are affected by this case and you want to actually sort of contribute yourself, there will be a link in the description for Help for Heroes. We have no affiliation to them in any way. We just think that this story and the sort of victim involved would have really appreciated that sort of mention of the charity that they were involved with. Now let's get into the video.
So the 22nd of May 2013 starts like a very normal day for Lee Rigby. He is due at the Royal Artillery Barracks in Woolwich, where he was stationed and would work. And by around 2 p.m, he arrives at Woolwich train station, a short walk from the Woolwich barracks. Lee is wearing a Help for Heroes jumper and his military-styled backpack. Clearly a very proud army man, hence his choice of attire. Now, around 10 minutes after he arrives at Woolwich train station, he's walking towards the barracks and he is walking down Wellington Street. And it's at that moment in time when this happens. So obviously that clip that we've played there cuts short. We're not going to show the collision between the vehicle and Lee Rigby himself. But at that moment in time, right, what you can see is there is a silver vehicle trailing behind the car that swerves across the road and runs over Lee Rigby. Now, if you're the driver of that silver vehicle, what do you think you're thinking at that moment in time? Because I personally don't think that my mind would jump to something as heinous, as barbaric as what actually unfolded straight away.
Yeah, you're just thinking like a reckless driver, aren't you? You're just like, it's one of those things where someone might have drifted off, they've obviously been looking at their phone or something like that. The only caveat to that is the speed that is involved, right? We're in central London right now, and I don't think anyone is really expecting a car to speed up and veer at the same time at 30 to 40 miles an hour. Now, what we're also thinking about is after those traffic lights, it's, in the middle of the road, like it's a sort of a double lane road. You're not really saying someone's going to be veering off as if they were going to be turning. Something weird has happened, but the immediate reaction you would say, even from someone behind them, is go out and help. Like there's something that's gone on here, a big accident, and you're thinking, I need to go and help that person straight away.
And by the way, when you speak about the speed that the car's travelling at, like whenever you're driving through London, unless it's late at night, if you're in an Uber, if you're driving yourself through London, you're normally moving at between 20 and 25 miles per hour. It's normally pretty slow.
Yeah.
When I see a car veer off in the direction it did there, because I have seen an incident like this before, obviously not making contact with another person, this person crashed into a wall. I'm often thinking, and I don't mean any offence, but I'm often thinking maybe an elderly person behind the wheel, maybe someone that has some underlying conditions by the wheel, maybe someone suffered
Got
something.
confused or something.
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah.
fallen asleep behind the wheel or passed out for whatever reason. But obviously, the car itself, as we can see on screen now, is in quite a state. So you can see that there has been some significant impact that has been made there. And then when the sort of general public, because obviously it's not the busiest street ever in London, but it is still a populated street in London. There are people about, they see this incident happening, straight away they see both the driver and passenger door swing open of the car. They see the driver and the passenger run towards the man they've hit. Again, straight away, you're probably thinking that they're running to his aid, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, most reaction to a car accident is I've done something horrendously wrong. I've injured someone potentially in a serious way. Like 40 miles an hour can absolutely be, instant death for some people, to be fair. So, yeah, you're expecting these guys to go out and help the person straight away, but that is not what they do.
That's not what they do. What happened next absolutely shocked onlookers. Both men at this point start attacking Lee, who was already in no position to defend himself, and within seconds each man pulls out a knife out of their pockets and begin to repeatedly start stabbing Lee Rigby. Now this attack is ridiculously violent and calculated. The men swapped weapons and drew for more weapons, with one of them pulling a revolver gun out of his pocket and the other pulling out a meat cleaver. Now, the man with the meat cleaver starts hacking away at Lee Rigby, but in this moment, each man decides that actually the onlookers and everyone around haven't got a good enough view, potentially, of the man that they are attacking and of the incident that is unfolding. There's still actually a small amount of traffic passing by in the lane that the car had originally swerved across from, and therefore the two attackers drag the unconscious body now of Lee Rigby into the middle of the road and continue to hack at Lee Rigby's body, to stab Lee Rigby and to assault the soldier.
So this attack actually goes on for quite a long time if you're thinking about it. Usually in incidents like this, a stabbing can be over in a matter of seconds, but this is over a sustained period, like minutes we're talking about, like constant attacking this poor man lying in the middle of the road at this point. And it's at this point that's one of the most strange and potentially one of the most bravest things that I've seen in a case like this actually occurs. There's this woman who sort of positions herself in between the attackers and Lee Rigby, who's now lying motionless on the ground. The attackers are now confronting and talking to members of the public, actually actively asking them to film them as well, and they're out there and not paying attention to Lee. Now, this woman's name was Ingrid Loyal Kennett. She was a mother of two and a Cub Scout leader, and she actually was a trained first aider. She initially tried to help Lee and said that she could at one point actually feel a pulse, but what was clear is that soon after that point, Lee had actually passed away. As she's trying to help Lee, one of the attackers shouts at her, "Don't touch the body, go away." She then has a 10-minute long conversation with one of the attackers, and they talk about their motives and they talk about all the circumstances around the attack. She actually tries to reason with the men, tries to stop them from doing what they're doing, and tries to actually discuss their motivations around the case. And she describes that in great detail.
It's such a unique case, this one, because I feel like although normally the evidence comes out and the motivations come out, there's often a waiting period, isn't there, in such high profile significant incidents like this, where we're trying to draw the dots together and understand how we got to this conclusion and why we got to this conclusion. Whereas the two men, and most prominently the man that you saw at the start of this video, are very candid in their response. They're open. They're not only addressing people and encouraging people to take their smartphones out and their cameras out and film them, they're answering questions, and they're also being reassuring at the same time after carrying out something so barbaric, and not just on Lee Rigby. Like, Lee Rigby and his family are the biggest victims here, but also the members of the public that had to see that, they will be forever scarred for life. So to do something that affects so many people as a whole, but then to be having almost sane conversations, debates, dialogues with people is just something that we've never seen in the immediate aftermath of a crime, is it?
No, it's absolutely not. And what is so brave about what Ingrid actually did is that she maintained this conversation with a guy who's covered in blood, who's carrying a meat cleaver and a knife, who's literally meters away from her. So, like, she could not have got really much closer to the attackers than she actually did. And she actually asked him, like, are we safe here? Like, we're onlookers, you know, we're associated with this incident, we're near the victim, are we safe? And one of the attackers actually said, no, the women and children are absolutely safe. The only person and people that we want to do harm are the soldiers and the police officers around this case. And I have no idea how she actually did remain so calm. For me, if that was, I don't know about you, mate, but if that was me, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that incident. I'd probably run away, to be fair, because, like, let's be fair, there's a serious amount of danger going on here. And so credit to Ingrid, like, she's like so brave. So not only was there Ingrid involved in this, there's now about 60 to 70 people gathered around him. Now, what I find incredibly distressing is there's actually photographs and video of families walking by on their sort of day-to-day lives. There's literally, like, there's an instant and an image that I've seen, and it sort of sticks in my mind so vividly. There's actually a mum with a buggy, you know, and a young child associated with it, and they're walking past what is probably one of the most horrific incidents that they'll ever see in their entire lives. Probably anyone ever sees in their entire life, to be honest with you.
And the man who very much seemed to be the instigator in the attack actually was filmed by an onlooker saying, the only reason that we have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers. And when he was actually challenged, when he was questioned by one of the onlookers to say, then why have you attacked this man that was now lying responseless in Lee Rigby on the floor, he stated that this soldier killed Muslims in Iraq and in Afghanistan.
So one of the attackers actually gives a bystander, a woman called Amanda, a 2-page handwritten note. On that note, it was actually entitled "To My Beloved Children," which a lot of people have debated whether that was a general message or whether that was to his actual children, because it ends up this guy actually has 6 kids at home. Now, what they're also doing at this time is saying, record all of this, this is what we're expecting, make sure you film us what we're saying. But also, we know that there are several police calls going on, dozens of calls, I would say, to, the relevant police. Police have actually arrived on the scene, they've blocked off the roads, but this is where, at this point, armed police actually show up.
Yeah, well, the attackers are urging people to call the police, but they are not urging people to call the police because they want to be nicked. Basically, they're urging people to call the police because in their mind, in the sort of scenario that they've played out of best case scenario, how they want the day to go, they want this to be where the story finishes. They believe that with the gravity of the crime that they have committed, with the onlookers that have seen it, with there being video evidence there already, CCTV evidence there already, and not only that, the fact that they're holding weapons and, most significantly, a firearm, they know that the chances are that they will be shot by armed police. And to heighten those chances, they make sure that when the armed police unit do arrive, they charge in to the line of fire. They believe in doing so, they will go down as what is called martyrs, and that is basically a term believed in multiple religions as a person who dies for a cause believed to be in accordance with God's will.
So in a short period of time, we've actually established the motive of this attack, and we know there's a religious element to this, and we know roughly what has happened to this point. What we haven't done yet in this episode is name the attackers, and this is because really at this point the police didn't know who they were. But firstly, out of respect, why don't we talk about the victim here, and why don't I give you a bit of a background about who he was. Lee James Rigby was born on the 4th of July 1987 in Manchester. He joined the army at the age of 18, and that was a lifelong dream for him, becoming a soldier, and he managed to do it. During his time in the army, he was stationed in various locations, including Cyprus, Germany, and Afghanistan. Eventually, he would end up being garrisoned in London, which was a big break for him, being able to be in the city that he knew, and he would take on ceremonial duties at the Tower of London. In 2007, he married his partner Rebecca, and in 2011, he actually had a son called Jack. Lee was a huge supporter of the charity Help for Heroes after witnessing so many traumatic experiences and also life-changing injuries of his friends and fellow soldiers while on duty. By all accounts at the time, Lee was an incredibly happy man, living his dream life and starting his new journey into fatherhood. He also had a very loving and supportive family around him, and when he was attacked, he was just 25 years old. So as you can imagine, footage from this incident is being disseminated everywhere. We're not just talking about phone footage, it's now going out to global news. It's literally traveling the length and breadth of the country, but also the entire world at this point. So obviously we've just given you a little bit of a background to who Lee Rigby was. Joey, why don't you now tell me the identities of the attackers?
So the first of the attackers that we need to speak about, the more prominent figure, the more vocal figure in the attack, is a man named Michael Adebolajo. Adebolajo was born in the United Kingdom to Nigerian parents and raised in a Christian family. He had plenty of friends growing up from all different walks of life and was definitely not confined to one community. He actually had a close friend growing up called Kirk Redpath, who went on to join the Irish Guards and tragically lost his life in Iraq when he stepped over a disguised road bomb. Now, Adebolajo was a bright student in school, getting both GCSEs and A-levels, but his parents really wanted him to go to university. By this point, though, Adebolajo had already started showing that he had major problems in dealing with authority. However, this wasn't actually that concerning. It wasn't actually that far out of line as to what most men around his age from the London area would have experienced. And in 2003, his parents would finally get their wish when Michael joined Greenwich University, where he would reportedly study sociology and politics. And it was in the same year that at the age of 19, a decade before the killing of Lee Rigby, that Michael Adebolajo became a converted Muslim. And as a troubled young man who had lost friends and family members in his earlier years, struggled to deal with the harsh realities of life, and already starting to feel aggrieved by the world around him, dedicating his life to any religion is something that you would imagine would inspire a positive change. For Adebolajo, it probably gave him a sense of meaning, purpose, authority that he could actually respect, and maybe most importantly, a sense of direction and community that I believe he may have lacked before. But these newfound beliefs very quickly turned extreme, and Adebolajo started to attend protests that would often turn violent as well. He'd actually later go on to admit in court that it was the war in Iraq that affected him the most, and throughout the years he became a more prominent figure, especially protests, marches, demonstrations, and can even be seen here pictured behind Arjem Chowdhury before his latest arrest last year for terror-related offences, in which he will now serve life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. Now, Adebolajo himself was confident and well-spoken, and actually spoke at a demonstration against the English Defence League in 2009, where he was quoted as saying, "Don't be scared of them. Do not be scared of the police or of their cameras. You are only here to please Allah. Now, everything is brilliant in hindsight, Josh, but in hindsight, knowing what we know and the events that went on to unfold, is this particular message a little bit concerning for you? Because to preach the message of Allah isn't concerning. Each religion does do that, whether it's Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, any other religion that I'm not thinking of. Every single religion will preach the message of their Lord, their God, their higher powers, and there's nothing concerning about that. But to say don't be scared of the police or their cameras, well, what are police and CCTV actually there for? They're there really to prevent crimes, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And also, like, for me, it's not necessarily like don't listen to the police, because I think a lot of people question the police in various different guises. You've seen that in America with the defund the police sort of movement, I would say. But also, like, there's various other things, right? So a lot of people question the police. Like, look at was it the Sarah Everett case where the policeman, the ex-policeman,
Wayne Couzens, yeah.
Yeah, Wayne Couzens. So, like, that messaging isn't so problematic. Like, I personally really respect the police, and I would always sort of listen to the authority of a police officer, but you know, some people don't, to be fair. What I'd be more concerned of is it's sort of like we as citizens of any country kind of adhere to the laws of those countries. It's sort of like, you know, if you're a citizen of Britain, you kind of acknowledge the rules and regulations and laws of Britain. So to flaunt those is something which is concerning, and I'll explain what I mean. If you say to someone right now, I'm going to go out and I'm thinking about murdering someone, that's flaunting a law. But you could also say that for any other law, couldn't you? You could say, oh, do you know what? I am going to go and I'm not going to pay my taxes. That's sort of acknowledging and admitting that you're going to break a law. And in a lot of circumstances, that would be used against you. Do you see what I mean? So you would be breaking it. So, like, the only way that society kind of exists and this whole fabric of, you know, random stuff is actually knitted together is because we say we adhere to these laws and there's a steady footing. Do you know what I mean?
So, in a way, would it be fair to say, and this is my insinuation, but would it be fair to say that by the fact that he was at a demonstration, which plenty of law-abiding Muslims, followers of the Islamic community would have been at, and, you know, are causing absolutely no problem, is it fair to say that that statement that I've just read you there isn't enough for you to have him on sort of police radars as a person that they should really be suspicious of and should be keeping a close eye on?
No, I think at that point, those words in particular, we're just talking about this quote, I don't think that is inciting criminal behaviour.
No. Well, in 2010, Adebolajo was arrested with 5 other people in Kenya. At this time, a terror organisation called Al-Shabaab, a militant group linked to Al-Qaeda, were training and recruiting extremists to fight for them in nearby Somalia, which you can travel to by car from Kenya undetected. And in a Kenyan court, Adebolajo did not miss the chance to have his words be heard.
In the dock of a Kenyan court, one of the Woolwich suspects, Michael Adebowale.
These people, they are mistreating us and we are innocent, believe me.
His brother-in-law has told ITV News Michael Adebowale was tortured there and the British government wouldn't help.
Now, Adebolajo's brother-in-law actually went on to speak about his time and his treatment in Kenya, and he said that he was treated awfully there. He was both physically and sexually assaulted, according to his brother-in-law. There is no proof of this. This is obviously just his word against, you know, the Kenyan government's word. And he also said that Adebolajo was under the constant threat of beheading from the Kenyans, and eventually he was deported back to the UK and no charges were filed against Adebolajo. However, that same brother-in-law claims that when Michael Adebolajo was flown back to the UK, he was actually detained and questioned by MI5, and that apparently MI5 asked Michael Adebolajo to become a spy for them. So again, this is just his brother's words, but
yeah, there's no evidence for this, really, is there, beyond what the brother-in-law said. But what he's saying are quite, very serious accusations. And also the fact what he's suggesting is that the British government didn't look after this guy well enough, especially with the fact of him being in another country, being a British citizen, and not looking after him in the ways they should have.
Now, speaking of the British government and the British authorities, Michael Adebolajo was obviously on their radar once he had come back from Kenya. But a lot of people are on their radar, and they didn't deem him high up enough to be someone that was plotting or planning an imminent terror attack. And do you know what? Like, as I say, when he was back in the UK, he was actually married. He had 6 children. Do you know one of his children, his youngest son, was born just 4 days before the attack? Now, this attack was calculated, right? We know that they went out to buy weapons. We know that there was a plan for the attack. Imagine, I don't actually have this on fact that he was at the birth, but more than often the parent is at the birth. Imagine being at the birth of your child. Like, I've experienced that feeling, holding your baby for the first time and whatnot. Must it not be such a weird feeling knowing that you plan to go and do something of this nature, and by his words, go out as a martyr,
and
just
then
days after, end your own life after bringing life into the world?
Yeah. This is the thing that I always struggled with in terms of this case, in terms of rationalising it. Like, obviously, he has a further and potentially a higher purpose to what he believed his actions were. And this is what I mentioned about the note earlier on. People were disputed about whether he meant his beloved children, i.e. his biological children, or the people that were following him and were implicit in, his own beliefs, right? I would hope that any father would want to leave a message to their children if they were planning something like this. But it seems that note wasn't directly to them. So, mate, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all.
Yeah. Well, it leads us on to the other man who was involved in carrying out the attack. This man was also called Michael. His name was Michael Adebowale. He was actually 6 years younger than Michael Adebolajo, and the two were said to have met at university. There are conflicting reports of this, however, so I'm not quite sure. But here's what I am sure on, and here's what I do know about Michael Adebowale's life. But just quickly, before we get into all that, we are now offering channel memberships. I say now offering, we have got over 150 of you guys now as channel members. And what do you get for that? Well, you get each and every episode up to 48 hours before the general public and subscribers. And as well as that, what are they getting every single week, Josh?
They are getting a bespoke and unique live stream just for members, and we will be speaking about cases. We'll actually be teasing the next video as well, so that's a unique thing that you get nowhere else. And it's not just that, we'll be doing other behind the scenes content, and about once a month we'll be doing a bespoke video just for members, often a Q&A, but we might do individual cases just for the members.
Yeah, members Q&A every single month. It is less than £5 per month, and you get so many more benefits with that. So if that sounds like a bit of you, it is linked in the description. Adebowale's life was extremely different from a very young age than his accomplice. He was involved in a lot of gang violence, and by 2008, he was said to be dealing substances and living in a flat which would be commonly known as a crack den. It was actually in this flat where Adebowale had a life-changing experience at quite a young age when an ex-bare-knuckle fighter called Lee James came to buy some substances from Adebowale, who was at the flat with his 2 friends. An altercation broke out and Lee James stabbed both Adebowale and his other friend, whose name I don't actually know, due to the fact that they were both just 16 at the time, and therefore they were never actually named in the media. But to make matters even worse, James then went on to butcher Faradin Elizada to death in front of Adebowale and his friend. Now, after this event, Adebowale was diagnosed with both PTSD and depression, but more concerningly, he told a psychiatrist that he was hearing voices in his head. It was in the following year of 2009 when Adebowale was charged and sentenced to 15 months in prison for dealing offences. And although I'm not not sure in what order it came. It was that same year of 2009 when Michael Adebowale converted to Islam. What followed after Adebowale's prison sentence isn't really clear, and it's actually very hard to find out any information on him, apart from the fact that he did used to attend some of the similar demonstrations that Michael Adebolajo did.
So we know now about the victim and we know about the attackers. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly take you back to the scene of the crime. The last thing we'd heard in this episode was that the two men were running towards police and they were shot. Now, the police shot both these guys in the shoulder and the arm. They did that intentionally to get rid of the weapons that the boys had, but they didn't want to actively try and kill them. That's the directive of the UK police. Now, when they are shot, they're laying on the ground. The first thing that officers do, alongside paramedics, is give the guys and the attackers first aid. Now, this is unimaginable at this point. Like, imagine this being in the United States or somewhere like that. You've got two guys running at you with weapons. One has a revolver, and we're literally getting the police to help them from not passing away. Like, these guys would have just been shot point blank in the States, but in England it's very, very different, right? And when they were on the ground, Adebolajo actually says, "Please let me lay here. I didn't want anyone to die. I just want the soldiers out of my country," which just feels really alien to what the events of the day actually said. And then he said, "I wish the bullets had killed me so I can join my friends and family." So this very much goes into what Joey was saying earlier on about how he wanted this to be, a murder suicide. He wanted it to be, a martyrdom element and a plan that he had hatched. Now, both of the men were then transported to hospital and they remained in a stable condition and they were treated there. After that, a few days later, they were able to recover and they were interviewed by police. Now, Adebolajo actually gives an incredibly candid interview with the police, and you can see that here.
Between us, we decided that the soldier is the most fair target because he joins the army with kind of an understanding that your life is at risk when you join the army. So we sat in wait, and it just so happened that he was the soldier that was spotted first.
And Adebolajo actually very clearly sets his stall out in this interview and says, as you saw there, your life is at risk when you join the army. And that was the rationale for the attacks. If he was a soldier, he was able to go to war, and he felt that this was a warlike situation, and therefore there was justification in his mind for the killing. Now, Adebowale also was in police custody at this time, also being interviewed separately, and his experience in custody was slightly different to Adebolajo's. Adebowale's behaviour was much more unpredictable. He would speak a lot, but he would also be violently punch an officer, threw water in one's face, and he also spat at another. So he had to be restrained throughout the police interrogation beyond that point. Now, as Joey also mentioned earlier on, he was also experiencing some mental health issues at this time, and it was said that he was hallucinating and also like hearing voices. But despite these mental health issues, the judge deemed that he was fit to stand trials. And during this entire time that the police were interrogating the attackers, this was then where they were trying to build evidence, and we finally got to trial. Now, the trial was on the 29th of November, 2013. And both the men, even though they've gone through the entire interrogation process, even though they've spoken to people on the street, they've been filmed confessing to their crimes and also explaining the reasons why they actually completed those crimes, actually pled not guilty, which meant that Lee Rigby's family had to sit through a trial and they had to listen to the gruesome details of the attack. They had to be shown video of the attack, of which there was plenty of video evidence, and you can imagine how incredibly traumatic that was. There were scenes where the family of Lee Rigby were standing outside of the court both during and after the trial, and they're absolutely devastated, and you can understand why. In fact, all of their statements had to be given by a family liaison officer, a police officer, for that reason, just because of how distraught they were, and I can completely understand that. Now, Adebolajo actually tried to argue, as I said, that his crimes were justifiable, just crazy to even think about, and that was under the 17th century concept of the Queen's Peace, which basically says that a soldier is at war, and therefore Rigby's killing was a legitimate battlefield killing. Now, this was immediately rejected by the judge and thrown out as any sort of example of why it could be justified. Now, Adebowale's lawyer actually presented no evidence during the trial in defense of the client, but he did say that his client was in agreement with the other attacker to join his war, so he described it. So on December the 19th, 2013, both Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale were found guilty of Lee Rigby's murder. The jury actually only took 90 minutes to deliberate their findings, and Adebolajo was cleared of the charge of the attempted murder of the two police officers, which is also another ridiculous part of this. The guy's run at 2 police officers with a knife and a cleaver, and they've said that that wasn't attempted murder. Honestly, I don't know how he got away with that. The sentencing took place on the 26th of February 2014. During the sentence, the judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, claimed that their extremist views were a betrayal of their religion. This prompted a fracas in the dock, with Adebowale shouting, "That's a lie," and Adebolajo screaming, "God is greatest," in Arabic. Security guards had to force them to the ground and remove them from the courtroom. So basically, the sentencing was therefore done from that point in their absence. They weren't allowed in the courtroom. Then the judge passed both of the sentences down to the attackers. Adebolajo was given a whole life tariff, meaning that he will never be eligible for parole and will die in prison. The judge actually said that he was the leader of the joint enterprise, and he was one of those rare cases warranting a whole life term, concluding that he had no real prospect of rehabilitation. Adebowale was jailed for a minimum of 45 years. His lesser role and his younger age and the pre-existing mental health problems that we've described in this episode were considered factors in the sentencing by the judge. And although the sentencing was less, the judge still deemed his conduct to be sickening and pitiful. And that means that his eligibility for parole will come in 2059. Now, both men actually attempted to appeal their sentences, but their applications were rejected in December 2014. Now, after the court case and after they were sent to prison, Adebowale actually expressed regret for his actions in 2018, and he actually apologized and said that he actually misinterpreted the Quran and that he was actually brainwashed at the time of the attacking. And he actually contacted Lee Rigby's family and offered his apology for the attack. But it was Lee Rigby's mother that stated that she would actually never accept his apology and she could never forgive him. So that is where we leave the court case. But this was one of a terrorist incident, of which there were several about this time, wasn't it, Joe?
It was, yeah, but it was something that unless we've got the sort of courtroom pictures that are drawn or the paintings, whatever they are, you wouldn't know. And a lot of people wouldn't have known this anyway. But in that court case you spoke about, did you know that Adebolajo had no 2 front teeth? Did you know this?
I didn't know that.
He actually had his 2 front teeth knocked out in what he described as an attack on him by prison officers when he was actually at HMP Belmarsh awaiting his trial. Obviously, the prison officers denied attacking him. It would more be a case, in their opinion, of resisting, not arrest because you're already in prison, but, you know, resisting confinement or whatever. And his 2 front teeth were knocked out in this incident. Obviously, from the way that we saw them behave in the court, or at least was explained to us in the court, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that this could have happened. The 2 prison officers were both suspended from work, but this was said to be more cautionary. They returned to work with no case to answer. Now, this wouldn't be the only prison-related incident that happened with either of the inmates going forward. But in terms of the actual specific aftermath of this event, this was really the first, wasn't it, in multiple sort of high-profile terror attacks in the UK in a really short space of time. So to put things into perspective, between the year 2000 and between the year 2013, where obviously Lee Rigby was killed, there were a total of 52 people that died in the UK as a direct result of a terror-related incident. And all of these 52 deaths were a consequence of the 7/7 bombings, which were obviously multiple bombs that took place across London on public transport. This was in the year of 2005. However, In just the 4 years that followed Lee Rigby's death, there were 58 deaths due to terror-related incidents. There was the London Bridge attack that happened shortly after, the Manchester Arena bombing, but there were also multiple terror attacks of arson on mosques around this time. There was the 2017 Finsbury Park attack during Ramadan, when a group of Muslim worshippers were hit by a van who had mounted the pavement. So clearly the killing of Lee Rigby incited a lot of terror-related incidents from across the UK over the next few years. Now, Adebowale also had a prison-related instance where he punched a staff member in the face after that staff member turned off a television that he was said to have been watching at the time. But other than that, and the fact that he obviously suffers with a lot of schizophrenia and is treated in prison for that, we don't actually know much more about either's time in prison.
Now, perhaps one of the most sort of scary parts of this case is the missed opportunities that the British secret services, MI5 and other sort of like government agencies had to identify these attackers' descent into extremism and potential violence on British soil. And there were lots of events from a very long time ago. Like, we're talking about the first one being in 2008, where both of the men were linked to, you know, significant extremist groups. And while there was an inquiry that went on after this to identify those failings, and while MI5 acknowledged that there were failings in their, I suppose, sort of search and sort of like criminal investigations into the attackers, the inquiry actually deemed that there was not significant enough evidence to sort of suggest there were systemic errors going on, or that they were at fault to this incident and for Lee Rigby's killing. So what I find absolutely crazy is, while someone could acknowledge that there were errors and faults, they cannot be actually capable for missing these guys and letting them slip through the net effectively. So yeah, there were serious errors, so much so that Adebowale actually, I suppose, sort of not confessed, but kind of actually said in a internet chat room that he was planning a murder of a British soldier, and actually used those terms and discussed martyrdom and what that meant to him. And again, the secret services and MI5 were not able to identify this quickly enough, or put these guys under surveillance quick enough to actually, you know, get them and convict them. So I feel that that was a glaring and awful error on their part.
Yep, as always in cases like this that we cover, there's always multiple missed opportunities. But I do want to finish on a more positive note, and that is just quickly speaking about the Lee Rigby Foundation. It was established by Lynn and Ian Rigby after their son's murder, and the organisation was set up as a support network for bereaved military families, establishing a series of static caravans that families can use for a holiday break. Now, just quickly, Josh, how nice is that? Like, not just a charity where funds are raised and whatever, but something like that, a sort of short holiday break or something. I think it's really got a personal touch to it, hasn't it?
It really does. And it wasn't just the Lee Rigby Foundation as well that money was raised for. In the aftermath after this event, £600,000 was actually raised for Help for Heroes as well. Obviously, Lee Rigby was wearing the Help for Heroes hoodie. It was a key part of his life. And so the legacy from a charitable perspective, both from his own foundation and also for Help for Heroes, is significant. And again, you know, anyone watching that wants to contribute to those, you're absolutely welcome to. I think that'd be a great thing to do as a result of this video.
And 2 years ago, in 2023, Lee Rigby's then 2-year-old son won a Pride of Britain award after his fundraising work for Scotty's Little Soldiers, which was in his father's memory. So that there is the story of Lee Rigby. And I think it's been one that it's a very, very sensitive subject. It's a horrific crime, as all of the crimes that we cover on this channel are. And it's one that we want to, you know, make it be known that it's a subject that we don't want to have to shy away from in future upcoming videos but obviously treat it with the respect to all of the viewers that might be watching this.
Yeah, and look, you know, the one story that I think we have to cover is the 7/7 bombings. We actually mentioned that in this episode as well.
Yep.
And I feel that we have shied away from making that episode to date because we're worried about, well, we want to do it right and we want to make sure we do it in a sensitive way. And so I feel like we will be covering that, and we absolutely should. But I think what we want to convey more than anything in terms of this video itself is that while this case is incredibly gutting and really horrendous, and we hope we've done it justice, I think what we want in the UK and also sort of globally in the world is for people to be able to live in peace and prosperity without fear, and, you know, live in safety. And so that's what we hope we've been able to convey during the course of this episode.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said that globally, not just in the UK, we want everyone everywhere to live in peace and harmony. And as much as it was a tricky subject to tackle, it's a tackle that we definitely do want to make on this channel. We want to give you guys the content that you want to see. So carry on letting us know what you want to see in the comment section below. Please give a like to the video, subscribe to the channel. We will see you all in the next one.